Her billionaire sheikh father married her off to a servant, but he fell madly in love. Under the burning sun of the endless desert, the grand palace gleamed like a fortress of dreams and secrets. Gold shimmered from every corner, jewels caught the light in wild dances, and the aroma of rare spices wrapped the halls in a seductive veil. Amidst this opulence, the figure of the billionaire sheikh stood tall and unyielding, his cold gaze piercing through the marble and silk. A storm brewing behind his eyes, his daughter, Layla, felt the weight of betrayal crush her chest as the decree echoed through the lavish corridors. Forced into a marriage she never wanted, not to a prince or noble, but to a humble servant, a shadow in her world of grandeur. Her heart throbbed with raw anger, frustration igniting, like willfire inside her delicate frame. She clenched her fists, the fine silk of her gown brushing against her trembling skin, while the scent of jasmine from her mother's garden contrasted bitterly with the poison in her veins. Jamal, the servant, was an unassuming man, his quiet presence almost invisible to the eyes used to grandeur and ceremony. Yet beneath the humble thread of his robe, something resilient and fiercely honorable flickered. When the news came that he was to wed the sheikh's daughter, the palace buzzed with scandalous whispers. How could a servant claim the hand of a princess? The whispers clawed at Jamal, yet he bore the weight with a steady heart, caught between fear and something unexpected, a growing respect for Layla, the woman who now shared his fate. Their first meeting was charged with tension. Layla's eyes flashed with disdain, her voice sharp as the edge of a desert blade. "I am no prize for your kind." Jamal lowered his gaze, voice steady but gentle. "I am no man you need to fear." The walls of the palace seemed to shrink around them, secrets and silent challenges hanging heavy in the air. But beneath the harsh words, something fragile began to bud, a tentative curiosity, an unspoken yearning for understanding. Yet fate, ever merciless, was not done with its cruel games. On the night of their wedding, as shadows swallowed the golden light, a servant whispered a secret that rippled through the palace like a deadly venom. Jamal was not who he appeared to be. Hidden beneath his servant's garb lay a legacy powerful enough to shake the foundations of the sheikh's family, a secret tied to forgotten bloodlines and long-buried debts. The revelation sent tremors through the hierarchy, jeopardizing the fragile alliance that bound Layla and Jamal. The sheikh's stern visage faltered for the first time as he faced the impossible truth. The marriage was no longer just a scandal. It was a challenge to the very throne he had built. And as Layla's heart fought between hatred and an unexpected blossoming love, the path ahead darkened with uncertainty and fierce desire. Before the next secret of this dazzling emirate unfolds, make sure you're already part of our caravan of stories. Many fates will still be woven, and I don't want you to miss a single moment. Leave a like if the heart of this billionaire sheikh has already captivated you. Tell me in the comments, which city do you watch this saga from? And what twist do you think is coming next? Your passion for these dramas inspires us to keep going. Thank you for being with us. The corridors of the palace, once alive with whispers, now simmered with a heavier, darker tension. Layla's delicate hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the marble balcony, the moonlight casting silver shadows over the restless desert beyond. Her heart hammered with a violent mix of betrayal and disbelief. How could her father, the mighty billionaire sheikh, have traded her like a precious jewel for a servant's hand? And yet that servant, Jamal, so unyielding and calm, was now the centerpiece of her shattered world. Inside the grand hall, Jamal sat quietly at the far end, his servant's robe a stark contrast to the embroidered silk surrounding him. Behind his calm exterior, a storm raged. The secret burden he carried now threatened to unravel the fragile threads binding this forced union. He could see the fire of disdain in Layla's eyes, each glance cutting deeper than any blade. Yet beneath that fire, he caught fleeting shadows of vulnerability, like a desert flower hiding beneath harsh winds. "Your Highness," his voice was soft but firm when he finally stood, closing the distance between them. "This marriage, though unexpected, is now our reality. I will honor it." Layla's laugh was cold, sharp as the desert night wind. "Honor? You don't even belong here. You're a servant, a ghost in my world." Her words, though venomous, stirred something unexpected in Jamal's chest, a fierce determination. A servant's roots do not define the heart's worth. The palace, a cavern of opulence and power, seemed to shrink, walls echoing the silent battle of wills between two souls thrown together. By fate, guarded eyes watched quietly from the shadows, the courtiers sensing the tension, the scandal that threatened to fracture the sheikh's reign. As days slipped by, Layla wandered through the lush gardens her mother once cherished, the scent of jasmine a cruel reminder of warmth she had lost. Each petal seemed to whisper secrets in the wailing desert breeze. She wanted to hate Jamal with every fiber of her being, yet every encounter chipped away at the walls she'd built. The moments of forced politeness, the rare flashes of kindness in his eyes, and the quiet strength beneath his humble exterior unsettled her. Meanwhile, Jamal endured the sideways glances, the whispered judgments. But beneath the servant's garb, pride burned fiercely. He would prove that bloodlines did not dictate destiny, that loyalty and courage mattered more than gold or titles. Yet the secret he kept, one that could shatter everything, gnawed at his conscience with relentless urgency. One evening, beneath a sky blanketed with stars, Layla found herself drawn to the ancient library, a place where the grandeur of her family's history lay buried in dust and scrolls. There, between crumbling tomes and faded portraits, Jamal awaited her, the flickering lantern casting long shadows over his serious face. "You seek answers," he said quietly. "I can share what I know, but it will change everything." Curiosity wrestled with caution in Layla's eyes. She stepped closer. "Speak, then." Jamal's voice dropped to a whisper, tinged with pain. "I am not just a servant. My blood runs through veins linked to a line forgotten by the sheikh's court, a lineage betrayed and erased." The weight of his confession fell like a tempest. Layla's fingers clenched around the corner of a heavy book, her breath caught in her throat. The secret dragged them both into a web of lies, betrayal, and a power struggle deeper than either dared imagine. "You mean to say," Layla's voice wavered, "that you carry the claim to something that could challenge my father's throne?" He nodded solemnly. "That is why our union is dangerous. Not just a scandal, but a threat. One my enemies fear, as much as yours. For a moment, silence wrapped around them, thick and suffocating as the desert heat. Then the sound of distant footsteps shattered the fragile calm. A figure emerged, a trusted advisor, eyes sharp and unreadable. "Your Majesty," the man said with forced calm, bowing deeply to Layla. "There are matters you must know about Jamal." Layla's eyes darted to Jamal, whose jaw tightened imperceptibly. The palace, once a beacon of power and safety, now felt like a crucible, its walls closing in with secrets ready to explode. Later, in the solitude of her chambers, Layla's mind churned like the restless sands outside. Her father's decree had forced a path she never sought, but now the stakes were higher. The man she hated, and yet could not fully despise, held a past intertwined with her family's fate. Every pulse of her heart drummed with confusion, fear, and a strange, reluctant hope. Outside, the desert wind whispered, carrying with it a warning as old as the sands. Alliances forged in secrecy often demand the highest price. Suddenly, the doors to her chamber swung open with a startling urgency. A breathless messenger stood in the doorway, eyes wide with terror. "Princess Layla," he gasped. "There's news from the southern border. An army marches, led by a man claiming ties to Jamal's forgotten lineage. They say he intends to reclaim what was stolen." Layla's breath hitched. A cold shiver traced her spine. Jamal appeared behind her, voice low and steady, yet laced with urgency. "This is no longer just about us. The past is rising, and the throne may shatter if we do not face it together." Their eyes locked, a fragile truce in a storm of uncertainty. The future loomed vast and threatening, filled with betrayals yet to come and desires yet unspoken. In that charged moment, Layla felt the first true crack in her armor. This servant, this man with hidden blood and untold power, was no mere shadow in the gilded halls. He was, perhaps, her only hope. And as the desert night deepened, a distant thunder rolled, a harbinger of battles that would test their hearts, their loyalties, and the fragile bond that fate had forced upon them. The messenger's words still echoed in the palace's labyrinthine halls, mingling with the restless desert wind that seeped through the cracked windows. Layla's fingers trembled against the folds of her gown, the weight of the revelation pressing down on her chest like the unforgiving sun overhead. An impending attack on the southern border wasn't just a distant threat. It was a mirror reflecting the dark past they both carried, secrets now clawing their way into a future neither dared to imagine. An army, led by a man tied to your bloodline? Layla's voice barely rose above a whisper, but the shock in her eyes was unmistakable. Jamal's jaw clenched, his usual calm fractured by the gravity of the news. "Not just any man. He claims the right to reclaim what our family lost. What was stolen generations ago. If he succeeds, it could shatter everything my enemies and your father work to protect." The silence between them grew thick, laden with the fragile truce formed out of necessity, yet charged with the fragile hope of something unspoken. "I never wanted this marriage," she said suddenly, her voice raw and brittle. But now I see our fates are tied in ways I can't yet understand. Jamal's gaze softened, the fire behind his dark eyes flickering with a rare vulnerability. Then we face this storm together, not as princess and servant, but as two souls bound by a cause much greater than us. A low rumble rolled across the garden beyond the balcony, the distant thunderblade of desert storms or the distant march of soldiers. Layla couldn't tell. Her gaze drifted to the endless horizon, where the night sky bathed the sprawling sands in an eerie glow. The palace, with all its riches and secrets, now felt more like a cage than a sanctuary. "Have you told your father?" she asked cautiously. Jamal shook his head. "He doesn't know yet, but when he does, he will realize that the enemy is closer than he ever feared, and that this marriage was only the beginning of a challenge that threatens his reign." The door to the chamber creaked open once more, and an elderly woman stepped in, Layla's governess, her eyes clouded with concern. "Princess," the woman whispered, "your father demands your presence in the council chamber. Urgently." Layla's heart tightened. The court was ripe with whispers now. Every shadow concealed a hidden watcher. Every smile masked a knife. As she moved through the marble halls, each step echoed like a heartbeat. A warrior stepping onto an invisible battlefield. Jamal followed, silently, the servant's robe rustling softly. But to Layla, it was the quiet sound of defiance. The council chamber loomed ahead, vast, decorated with priceless artifacts and tapestries narrating the lineage of the Sheikh's ancestors. Yet tonight, the grandeur felt colder, more oppressive. The gathered men's faces were grave, eyes sharp with suspicion and dread. Her father, the billionaire Sheikh, sat at the head of the table. His usual stoic mask was strained thin, the lines around his eyes deepened by sleepless nights. "Layla," he began, his voice low but commanding, "this news cannot wait. Your marriage to Jamal was my decision, a necessary one. But now I fear it has placed us all in grave danger." Layla's throat tightened, but she raised her head with unexpected resolve. "Father, Jamal's bloodline is a secret that could undo us all. But he stands ready, not as a servant, but as an ally." Jamal stepped forward, meeting the eyes of every advisor in the room. "I will fight for this family, for this land. I carry the blood of a legacy erased, but I carry it with honor, not vengeance." Murmurs stirred the room, a mix of doubt and wary respect. A man at the far end, the royal advisor with cold gray eyes, leaned forward. "If this claim is true, Jamal's return may provoke war. We must prepare," he said, voice sharp as a scimitar. "But we must also ask, can this alliance truly hold, or will it fracture under the weight of secrets?" Layla's gaze locked on Jamal's, unspoken questions hanging heavy between them. Would his past drown the fragile bond they'd begun to build? Could trust bloom amidst such suspicion? The Sheikh's voice broke through the tension. "Prepare the defenses, but know this: no traitor will tear this family apart." The council dispersed, leaving an echo of uncertainty that settled like dust in the vast chamber. Outside, the night had deepened. Stars sparkled cold and distant. Layla and Jamal stood together on the terrace. The desert breeze wove around them, filled with the scent of jasmine and impending conflict. I never imagined I would find myself fighting side by side with a servant, Layla confessed, eyes reflecting the flickering lantern light. And I never imagined a princess could see past my station, Jamal replied, his tone both tender and fierce. Their hands brushed, a fleeting touch charged with unspoken promises and fragile hope. But as the wind whispered through the palace gardens, a shadow moved unseen. Behind them, a figure cloaked in midnight stepped out from the darkness, a cruel smile playing at his lips. His voice was silk and venom. If only you knew the full truth about Jamal, the blood he carries is not just a threat to the throne, it's a curse that could destroy everything you hold dear. Layla and Jamal turned sharply, hearts pounding in unison. The game of power had only just begun, and the desert's silence hid a secret far darker than any had imagined. The night's stillness fractured with a single, chilling revelation that would change everything. The council chamber's heavy doors closed behind Layla with a finality that seemed to seal the weight of what had just been shared. She leaned against the cool marble wall, the echoes of her father's decree still reverberating in her mind. Jamal stood by her side, the servant's robe still a stark contrast to the shimmering silks of the palace. Yet tonight, in the shadowed halls, they were equals, born of a shared destiny. Her breath caught as her mind raced. The man who claimed ties to Jamal's bloodline was no mere pretender. His army was real, pressing closer with every passing moment. The knowledge that her father's throne was already trembling beneath the feet of an ancient vendetta filled her with a fear she refused to show. Jamal's fingers brushed briefly against hers, a quiet gesture amid the tension, grounding her. His dark eyes held steady, burning with a fierce conviction that both comforted and unsettled her. "You carry the weight of this family's honor," he whispered, voice low, "and I will fight by your side, no matter what storms await." She allowed herself a fleeting glance at him, the hope that had begun to stir, fragile and uncertain. They were bound by blood, long forgotten, but also by the cruel hands of fate. The opulent palace seemed suddenly smaller, less a place of safety, and more a battleground carved from gold and secret shadows. That night, Layla found herself unable to rest. The scent of jasmine from the courtyard mingled with the desert's dry breath through her open window as she stared into the darkness. Her thoughts swirled like a desert storm. Duty, fear, a faint spark of something dangerous and unbidden. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Jamal's silhouette filled the doorway, hesitant yet resolute. "There is more," he said simply. "Secrets buried deeper than you know." Her heart quickened. "Tell me." He stepped inside, closing the distance between them. The lantern's golden light flickered against the walls, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts of the past. "The man marching toward us is not just a claimant. He carries a curse entwined with my bloodline, a darkness our ancestors tried to bury. His return is not merely a battle for power, it is a reckoning." Layla swallowed hard, the cold grip of dread seizing her chest. "A curse?" Her voice trembled. "What kind of curse?" Jamal's gaze dropped to the floor, the flicker of pain in his eyes nearly eclipsed by resolve. A secret so dark, it threatens to consume not only our enemies, but everyone touched by this lineage, including us. Silence settled heavily between them, broken only by the distant howl of desert wind. The grandeur of the palace had faded, replaced by the raw hum of a fate suddenly unmasked. Layla reached out, her hand trembling as it found his. "We face it. Together," she vowed, voice steadying despite the terror bubbling beneath. "No matter what it takes." A faint smile brushed Jamal's lips. "Then we are allies, bound by more than blood or title." Days passed with ruthless swiftness. The palace buzzed with nervous anticipation. Courtiers whispered in shadowed corners, eyes darting toward Jamal, questioning the servant's claim and the princess's allegiance. Yet amidst the whispers, a strange unity began to weave, fragile and hesitant, between Layla and Jamal. In the garden, beneath the swaying palms, their stolen moments became breathless strategies whispered under stolen stars. The rich scent of night-blooming jasmine masked the fear clenching Layla's heart, while the soft crunch of sand beneath Jamal's steps seemed like a promise that he would not falter. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, bathing the desert in bruised purples and golds, Layla received a summons from her father. The Sheikh's voice over the sealed calligraphy was as cold as the marble floors. The time had come to confront the enemy looming at their gates. The grand hall was suffused with a heavy silence as Layla entered, Jamal quietly following behind. The presence of the royal advisor, his expression as sharp as the curved dagger at his belt, sent a ripple through the gathered council. "My daughter," the sheikh began, his voice brittle but commanding, "we face a threat that will test the very foundation of our empire. Jamal's lineage is our hidden strength, but also a dangerous spark that could ignite war." Layla stepped forward, meeting her father's gaze with a surprising calm. "Father, I will stand with Jamal, not as your pawn, but as a defender of this family and the people who depend on us." A murmur rose from the council, some faces softening, others deepening into lines of suspicion. The advisor's eyes flicked to Jamal. "We must prepare for the worst. Yet even as we sharpen our swords, we must be vigilant of betrayal within these walls. The enemy's greatest weapon may not be his army, but the secrets hidden between us." Outside the palace, the desert wind grew colder, a prelude to the storm. Layla retreated to the balcony. The endless sands stretched before her like a vast sea of uncertainty. Jamal joined her, the weight of the night settling around them. His hand found hers once more, fingers intertwining. "Whatever darkness comes, we face it as one." Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught her eye. Beyond the gardens, cloaked figures slipped through the shadows. A chill ran down her spine. As realization dawned, the palace itself was no longer safe. The whispered warning drifted between them like a blade barely concealed. The enemy was not just outside the walls, but embedded deep within the heart of the Sheikh's world, ready to strike when trust was weakest. And deep in the stillness, a voice, low and venomous as the desert night, echoed through the silence. The curse of Jamal's bloodline has only just begun. Soon, even the strongest walls will crumble. The moon hung low over the palace, casting long shadows that mingled with the flickering lantern light. Layla's breath came in shallow bursts as she stared out into the endless desert, feeling the weight of an empire's secrets pressing down on her chest like the heavy silk of her gown. The delicate fragrance of jasmine drifted through open windows, but instead of comfort, it stirred in her a restless unease. Every heartbeat brought the echo of the messenger's warning. The army at the southern border, a living threat forged by blood and betrayal. Jamal's presence beside her was steady, a quiet flame in the cold night. His hand brushed hers in a deliberate, tentative touch that spoke of fragile trust and unspoken promises. For hours they had stood like that, two souls bound by a secret larger than either could bear alone. "We cannot pretend the palace walls will protect us anymore," Jamal whispered. His voice was low, gravelly yet calm, the kind of calm born only from weathering storms far fiercer than any desert tempest. "Our enemies don't just wear armor, they hide in shadows, within these very halls." Layla swallowed hard, her eyes tracing the curve of his jaw, the stubborn set of his mouth. A man born under the weight of secrets, carrying curses not just in his blood, but in his every step. She had once viewed him as an invader in her world. Now he was the only anchor she possessed amid the swirling chaos. A sudden movement caught her attention, a figure slipping silently through the corridor below, cloaked in darkness, yet impossibly familiar. Her heart clenched, muscles taut with alertness. "It's him," she breathed, almost inaudible, "the one who claims your bloodline. He moves within the palace." Jamal's eyes darkened, a storm igniting behind them. So the prophecy is true. The threat is not only beyond our borders, but inside these walls. The danger stands closer than we realized. The courtyard fountain's gentle trickle mingled with the distant howl of the desert wind. But beneath the serene sounds lurked a tension sharp as a dagger's edge. Layla squared her shoulders, the princess's dignity as much an armor as the guards stationed beyond the gates. "We must warn your father," she said, voice steady despite the tremor beneath. "But more than that, we must root out the traitor." In the war council chamber later that night, the air was thick with unease. Faces lined with suspicion and fatigue stared at Jamal and Layla, their alliance a fragile hope in a room heavy with doubt. The billionaire sheikh sat austere, the lines on his face carved deeper by sleepless nights and the weight of leadership. "This man within our palace, who moves like a shadow, who is he?" the sheikh demanded, voice cold steel cutting through murmurs. Jamal met his eyes without flinching. "He is Malik al-Fayez, a distant cousin to my true lineage, but a man poisoned by greed and vengeance. His army marches to reclaim what he believes is rightfully his, but his motives run darker than mere ambition." A murmur rippled among the council, their whispers sharp with fear. The royal advisor, an old man with gray eyes like frozen steel, leaned forward. "If Malik's claim weakens the throne, who can say what other secrets lie buried? We stand on the brink, not just of war, but of betrayal that may come from within our own ranks. Layla's gaze locked with Jamal's. For the first time, the gulf between princess and servant narrowed into a shared purpose. Neither was merely a pawn in this game. Together, they were the kingdom's fragile shield. The Sheikh's voice rang out, a command that brooked no argument. Find Malik, uncover his allies, prepare the guards, and lay bare all secrets that threaten this family. As the council dispersed, Layla lingered near her father. The cold mask of the Sheikh softened briefly, revealing a flicker of doubt and worry. This marriage was my doing, he confessed quietly, but I did not foresee the darkness it would unearth. You chose wisely, father, Layla answered, her voice firm yet tender. Jamal will fight not for blood or titles, but for what our family truly stands for. Jamal bowed his head slightly, gratitude and determination flickering in his eyes. Later, under the canopy of stars that painted the desert sky, Layla and Jamal met once more in the shadowed gardens. The air was thick with the scent of fragrant night blooms and the unspoken burdens they both carried. He reached out, his fingers tracing the curve of her hand with a gentleness that belied the tempest raging in his soul. Malik's curse does not end with him, Jamal said softly. Legends speak of an ancient pact, blood spilled and debts owed, that binds his fate to mine in ways even I do not fully understand. Layla's eyes shimmered with tears, yet held steady. Whatever darkness awaits, we face it together, not as princess and servant, but as partners who will decide the future. A sudden gust swept through the garden, rustling silk and igniting the orange glow of oil lamps. The night, for all its beauty, cloaked dangers yet unseen. Footsteps echoed sharply from the palace entrance. A guard burst into the garden, breathless and wide-eyed. Princess, Sheikh Jamal, there's been an attack near the southern gate. Scouts report Malik's vanguard has crossed the border, and they bring with them something unnatural. Survivors speak of shadows moving against the wind, as if the desert itself rises in rebellion. The words landed like a thunderclap, sending ripples of fear swirling in the cool night air. Jamal's eyes narrowed, the fire within blazing bright. This is no ordinary enemy. We face a dark force that will test every strength we possess. Layla gripped his arm, her voice a fierce whisper. Then we prepare, not just for war, but for a battle that threatens our souls. A flash of lightning split the horizon, followed by deep, rolling thunder. The desert seemed to hold its breath as the tempest gathered force. And in the palace's deepest shadows, unseen eyes watched, cold, calculating, and hungry for the destruction that the curse would unleash. The war for the throne had begun, and the fate of love and legacy hung by a thread thinner than the desert. Wind. The night air hung heavy with a mix of jasmine and danger as Layla stood upon the marble balcony, her gaze tracing the endless sands beneath the glittering stars. The desert's silent breath seemed to carry a warning, one she could no longer deny. Malik Al-Fayez was no mere shadow skulking through the halls. He was a storm poised to uproot everything she had ever known. Her father's empire, her fragile bond with Jamal, and the very foundation of the family legacy. Jamal emerged quietly from the shadows behind her, his dark eyes reflecting the flickering torchlight that lined the palace walls. "He's closer than we thought," he said softly, voice rough but steady. "Malik moves like a serpent, silent, deadly. His men are inside the gates. We cannot wait for the war council to act." Layla's breath caught, her heart thudded, loud enough, she was certain, to shatter the stillness of the night. If Malik walks the halls, plotting his next move, then the palace is no longer a sanctuary. It is a cage, prepared to suffocate us all. The wind kissed her face, as if to remind her of the harshness lurking beyond the gilded walls. Yet beneath her fears bloomed a strange resolve, the same fierce spirit that had once scorned Jamal's feet on these polished floors now sought him out as an ally, perhaps even something more. Her fleeting glance met his and lingered, a silent confession penetrating the tension that bound them. Steps echoed behind them. The grand doors to the balcony swung open abruptly, revealing the royal advisor's gaunt figure. His gray eyes gleamed with cunning and urgency, seemed to scrape dust from ancient stone. A trusted scout reports a mysterious absence among the troops. Malik's forces are not just fearsome. There are whispers of dark magic, a curse that turns men into shadows. If true, this threatens not only our armies, but the very souls of those who confront them. Jamal's jaw tightened, the flame in his eyes hardening into steel. This curse is the weight of my bloodline's sins. One Malik wields like a blade, just as his ancestors did. It is not merely a weapon, it is a reckoning. Layla stepped forward, powdered moonlight catching the sorrow in her eyes. Then hiding behind the veil of nobility and titles will not save us. If this darkness reaches within, only truth and trust can be our shields. The advisor's gaze flickered between them. There are loyalties within these walls that cannot be trusted. Malik has allies disguised in guise of servants, nobles, even family. A bitter taste coated Layla's tongue. The palace's grandeur had become a labyrinth of shadows, where every smile hid a blade, and every whisper could unravel alliances forged in blood. "We must act swiftly," the Sheikh's voice boomed from behind them, heavy with authority and a father's anguish. "Layla, Jamal, this union you share is more than a marriage. It is the only hope to unite divided legacies and stand against this emerging darkness. You will lead the house's defense." Jamal bowed his head, resolve freezing in his veins like the desert night's chill. "I will not fail." The council chamber soon filled with restless faces, their eyes flicking nervously toward the couple, who were supposed to be symbols of unity and strength. But suspicion lingered like a stubborn dust storm, and talk of betrayal whispered beneath courteous nods. Before plans could solidify, a sharp cry shattered the tense calm. Guards rushed in, bearing a wounded messenger, his robes torn and face streaked with dust and blood. "The southern gate, breached," he gasped. "Malik's vanguard strikes with shadows that move like living specters. Soldiers fall to whispers and phantoms. The desert itself seems to rise in his command." Gasps rippled through the commonwealth. Layla's hands clenched the ornate armrest, heart thundering against her ribs. Jamal's eyes narrowed until they were dark flames, smoldering with fury and fear. "This is no common assault," Jamal declared. "Malik's curse animates his army. This war will not be fought with swords alone, but with wills and souls. As the council scrambled to coordinate defenses, Layla and Jamal slipped away, drawn to the vast palace gardens, where the scent of jasmine blended with night's chill. Beneath the towering palms, their fingers intertwined, bridging the fragile distance forged by circumstance. "I was a servant, discarded and underestimated," Jamal whispered, voice roughened by emotion. "But in this moment, under this sky, I am your equal, your partner, and I fear that if we do not hold fast, all we cherish will be swallowed by darkness." Layla's eyes shimmered with tears. She refused to shed. "I can no longer deny what I feel, for all the pain and betrayal, for the walls we once built to keep each other out. I am bound to you now, by blood and battle, by hope." The desert wind swirled, stirring shadows among the roses and silks. Their breaths mingled, shaky and electric. A silent oath knotted tight amid the storm they faced. Suddenly, distant drum beats filled the air, war cries carried on dry winds. The ground beneath the palace trembled subtly, as if the desert itself recognized the coming storm. But before they could return inside, a chilling whisper curled through the night, like smoke, unseen, yet all-consuming. "You think Malik's curse is the deadliest threat? You know nothing of the darkness buried deeper still, one that will consume even the strongest hearts, unless sacrifice lights the way." A cold shiver ran down Layla's spine. She grasped Jamal's hand tighter in the fading moonlight, their fate entwined like the desert's relentless sands. The war had begun, but the battle inside was only just awakening. The palace felt unlike itself beneath the heavy cloak of night. The grand halls, usually resonant with the soft murmur of courtiers and the clink of crystal, were now silenced by an oppressive tension. Layla stood once more on the balcony, the cold marble pressing against her palms as she stared out into the black desert beyond. A shiver crawled up her spine, not from the chill of the night air, but from the storm of fear and uncertainty that churned within her. Beside her, Jamal's presence was a steadying flame in the darkness. His eyes, shadowed but burning with purpose, scanned the horizon as if expecting the desert sands to rise and announce the approach of the looming danger. The soft jasmine scent in the air did little to soothe the ache tightening Layla's chest. "They are closer than we feared," Jamal murmured, his voice low yet resolute. "Malik moves like a viper, striking from within, and his shadows crawl beneath the palace walls." Layla nodded slowly, swallowing the lump that had formed in her throat. The palace, a fortress of gold and silk, was no sanctuary. It was a gilded cage, threatened by betrayal hidden deep in its veins. "We must uncover his allies before he tightens his grip," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper, but laced with iron. Jamal's gaze softened as it met hers, a fragile spark igniting between them, a fragile truce forged not by blood or titles, but by shared danger. "Together, we can stand against what comes. But trust must be earned every moment." Her heart clenched. The gulf between princess and servant had all but collapsed beneath the weight of looming war and whispered curses. A sudden sound, a faint footstep, made them both freeze. Layla's eyes darted to the twisting marble stair below, where a dark figure melted into the shadows. It was him, Malik Al-Fayez, the man whose claim to Jamal's bloodline carried threads of vengeance and ancient curses. A man whose very presence poisoned the opulence around them. "He moves with purpose," Jamal warned, his hand brushing against Layla's as if to anchor them both. "And every step he takes pulls us closer to a war, not just for a throne, but for our souls." The weight of those words fell between them, heavy as the desert night. Layla's fingers clenched the cold railing tighter, her nails biting into the porcelain, white as her mind raced. The fate of families, empires, and the fragile bond they were painstakingly building balanced on a knife's edge. Inside the council chamber, steely voices echoed against carved stone walls. The Sheikh's presence was imposing, his posture rigid, every line on his face etched by sleepless nights and the sting of doubt. "We have tolerated shadows long enough," his voice cut through murmurs. "Find Malik, root him out, no matter his allies or the depth of his schemes." Layla answered with quiet conviction. "This war is unlike any we have known before. Malik brings dark powers tied to blood curses. We must prepare for enemies seen and unseen." Jamal's words carried the weight of forgotten histories, his voice steady despite the chaos outside. "The curse entwines us all. It's more than steel and sand. It is the past clawing into our present." The council's acceptance was laced with unease. Whispers of treachery blended with cautious hope that this unlikely union, princess and servant, might be the key to salvation. Night deepened, swallowing the flickering torches that lined the gardens where Layla and Jamal met in secret. The fragrance of jasmine clung to the air, an ironic comfort amidst the storm gathering on every horizon. He traced a trembling finger along hers, the warmth of his touch a stark contrast to the cold dread that filled the palace's marrow. "I was once invisible here," Jamal confessed, voice thick with emotion. "But now I am forced to fight beside you, not just for survival, but for what we might become." Layla's breath caught, eyes shining with unshed tears, born of fear and a hesitant hope. "Once I saw you as an intruder in my world. Now I see you as the anchor in my chaos, the only certainty I possess." Their hands intertwined, a fragile lifeline knitted through desperation and desire. The moon bathed them in silver, their shadows merging as the palace seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly, a frantic roar shattered the fragile peace. Guards burst into the garden, faces pale and voices sharp. "The southern gate is breached. Malik's vanguard has crossed the border. Witnesses speak of unnatural forces, shadows moving against the wind, and men succumbing to unseen terrors." The words crashed over Layla like torrents. Her heart thundered in her chest, a wild drumbeat warning of doom approaching faster than any desert storm. Jamal's eyes darkened with fierce determination. This is no longer a battle for land or title. It is a fight for the very souls of our people. Layla drew a shuddering breath. "Then we stand, not as princess and servant, but as guardians of everything we hold sacred. The desert wind picked up, swirling around them with whispered promises and threats. Flames from torches danced, casting restless shadows that toyed with their resolve. As they prepared to move deeper into the palace, a muffled scuffle echoed from the shadows nearby. Suddenly, a figure stepped from the dark, a man cloaked in midnight, his eyes glittering with cruel intent. A voice like silk and poison slithered through the chilled air. "You think Malik's curse is your greatest threat? The darkness beneath your feet runs far deeper. A secret that will unravel not just your crowns, but your very hearts." Layla's pulse stuttered. Jamal's grip tightened, the fragile thread of their alliance teetering on the edge of oblivion. The palace, resplendent yet riddled with peril, had become a battleground of shadows, where love and loyalty would be tested against betrayals more devastating than either could yet imagine. And beneath the endless desert skies, fate whispered its cruel verdict. The true war had only just begun. The palace was wrapped in an almost suffocating silence, broken only by the distant howl of the desert wind weaving through the vast corridors. Layla's hands pressed tightly against the cool marble railing as she gazed out over the cold expanse of the night-shrouded sands. The stars above shimmered like cold jewels, indifferent to the turmoil that churned within her chest, a storm born of betrayal, fear, and an unexpected flicker of determination. Behind her, Jamal stepped quietly into the moonlight, the dark fabric of his robe blending seamlessly with the shadows. His eyes, usually so steady and guarded, bore the sharp edge of urgency tonight. "He's deeper inside than we imagined," Jamal said, voice low but firm, breaking the silence like a whispered promise of danger. "Malik's men have infiltrated the palace, hidden like vipers lying in wait." Layla turned to face him, her eyes gleaming fiercely beneath arched brows. "We no longer have the luxury of denial. The walls that once kept us safe have become the prison holding us captive." The delicate scent of jasmine from the nearby gardens seemed almost cruel in its softness, a stark contrast to the darkness creeping into their world. The palace, with its towering columns and endless gilded halls, no longer held the majesty of a sanctuary, but the ominous weight of a battlefield. "We have little time," Jamal continued, tightening his jaw. "Malik's shadow spreads further than the borders. If we don't root him out soon, the entire kingdom will fall into chaos." A sudden creak echoed from the hall, and Layla's breath caught in her throat. Her sharp gaze darted toward the twisting staircase below. A shadow detached itself from the darkness, a figure moving with predatory grace. Malik Al-Fayez had returned, cloaked not just in darkness, but in vengeance. Jamal's hand found hers, grounding them both. The warmth of their touch was a fragile beacon amid encroaching night. His voice dropped to a razor edge. "Each step he takes tightens the noose. This is no longer a Game of Thrones. This is a war for souls." Her fingers curled instinctively around his. The sharp sting of fear mingled with a wild pulse of adrenaline. The delicate princess and the steadfast servant, once worlds apart, were now entwined in a fate neither could escape. The council chamber was thick with tension when they arrived. the ornate tapestries and polished marble cold underfoot. Layla's father, the billionaire Sheikh, sat at the head of the table, his face carved with exhaustion and the heavy weight of command. The small assembly of nobles and advisers exchanged furtive glances, their whispered doubts as potent as any weapon. "We have harbored the serpent too long," the Sheikh announced, his voice a deep rumble. "Malik must be found, his allies exposed. The betrayal within our gates ended." Layla stepped forward, voice steady as it cut through the murmur. "Malik wields a curse, father, not just swords. Dark forces bound to my husband's bloodline threaten to unravel everything. We must prepare for enemies seen and unseen." Jamal met the assembled eyes without hesitation. "The curse is the deadly legacy of my ancestors. Malik wields it like a blade, and it corrupts not only his army, but the very fabric of our lives." Whispers stirred uneasily among the council. Some faces tight with skepticism, others shadowed by fear. The royal advisor leaned forward, voice sharp as a scimitar. "If Malik's curse weakens our hold, traitors may rise from among us." Cloaked in loyalty, but sharpened with poison, the weight of those words settled like dust, thick and choking. Layla's gaze sought Jamal's, a fragile alliance hardened by necessity and kindled by trust they dared not speak aloud. "We stand at the edge of a precipice," the Sheikh declared. "We will prepare, we will fight, and we will not fall to shadows, be they outside our walls or within." The council dissolved into urgent motion, strategy and orders spilling like wildfire through the palace. Yet even as war drums thundered beyond the gates, a more insidious battle was beginning in the silent spaces between whispered consents and guarded silences. Later, in the solitude of the palace gardens, where moonlight filtered through palms like whispered blessings, Layla and Jamal stood close, the night pressing around them like a breath held too long, the scent of jasmine carried both comfort and forewarning. Jamal's voice was fierce yet tender when he spoke. "Malik's curse doesn't end with him. Ancients speak of a pact, a sacrifice made long ago to bind the darkness. The blood that runs through me is tied to those old sins, and now the price is due." Layla's eyes glistened, reflecting both tears and resolve. "Then whatever darkness waits, we face it side by side, not because of a throne or titles, but because this is our fight, and perhaps our salvation." Their hands found each other in the night, trembling, entwined, an unspoken vow amid the terrors that circled closer with every heartbeat. Suddenly, the sharp clatter of armor and hurried footsteps shattered the fragile calm. A breathless guard burst into the garden, eyes wide with dread. "The southern gate has fallen," he gasped. Malik's vanguard struck swiftly, bringing with them shadows that crawl and whispers that kill. Soldiers crumble beneath an unseen enemy. The desert itself seems to rise against us. Jamal's gaze darkened to burning coal. "This war is unlike any we have known. Our blades alone will not save us. Souls will be tested. Hearts will be broken." Layla clenched her jaw, breath short, but voice unyielding. "Then we stand, not as princess and servant, but as guardians of all we hold dear." The desert wind howled anew, threading through the palm fronds and silk curtains, carrying with it a whispered menace. Flames from distant torches flickered, casting long shadows that danced like specters at the edges of their vision. As they turned toward the palace, readying for the battle to come, a furtive figure stepped from the darkness, a man whose smooth voice was venom wrapped in silk. "You think Malik's curse is the deadliest shadow you face?" he hissed. "The true darkness lies buried deeper, one that will unravel crowns, shatter hearts, and demand sacrifices none are prepared to pay." Layla's breath caught, her fingers tightening around Jamal's. The fragile bond they'd fought to forge now trembled on the brink of ruin. As the echo of his voice faded into the night, a silent truth settled over them. The war for their future was no longer a distant battle. It was already inside the palace walls, waiting, watching, ready to strike at the fragile threads of trust before the dawn. The first light of dawn crept softly over the endless desert, tinting the grand palace's golden spires with hues of pale rose and warm amber. The air was still, save for the gentle rustle of jasmine leaves, stirred by a delicate morning breeze. Within the highest chamber, Layla stood beside Jamal, their hands entwined, the weight of nights filled with fear and uncertainty giving way to a fragile peace that now wrapped around them like a silken shawl. The storm that once threatened to tear them and the entire emirate apart had passed. The battle against Malik al-Fayez had been fierce, an unrelenting clash where shadows and secrets proved as lethal as swords. Malik's dark curse, woven from ancient blood debts, had almost undone them all. But united, Layla and Jamal had faced the abyss, breaking the chains that bound their families' legacies and forging a new future from the ashes. Jamal's voice broke the quiet, soft and steady as the rising sun. "The palace stands because we trusted in each other, Layla. Because we chose to face the darkness side by side, not as princess and servant, but as equals." She turned to him, her eyes shimmering with unspoken gratitude and a love that no decree or secret could contain. "I never believed fate could be so merciful. You were my captor by blood, but my salvation in every other way." Around them, the palace stirred to life, the courtiers' whispers now vibrant with hope rather than fear, the servants moving with renewed purpose beneath the banners that fluttered proudly in the morning light. Even her father, the billionaire Sheikh, who had once cast the marriage as a strategic pawn, now stood beside them both, his stern visage softened by the weight of hard-earned respect and a father's newfound pride. In the grand hall, the Sheikh spoke with the measured tone of a man who had seen empires nearly crumble, but also the promise of rebirth. This union, born of shadow and scandal, forged what no blade could sever, the unshakable bond of trust and love. Jamal is no mere servant. He is the blood of our land, the heart of our future. Layla smiled, the warmth in her chest growing with each word. The once stark walls that had confined her seemed transformed, now a cradle of hope and new beginnings. Her gaze slid to Jamal, whose quiet courage and enduring honor had rewritten the very story of their lives. "My father feared what he did not understand," Layla whispered, as they stood side by side in the rose-scented garden where so many secrets had been shared. "But today, I know the truth. Love is the most powerful legacy one can leave behind. Jamal nodded, his fingers tightening around hers. And together, we will protect that legacy, not just with swords or titles, but with hearts united beyond fear and old grudges. The jasmine petals danced in the morning light, a fragrant benediction to their journey. The palace gardens, once a silent witness to betrayal and secrets, now echoed with laughter, soft and genuine, as servants and nobles alike greeted the dawn of an era marked by unity rather than division. In a quiet corner, a child's laughter floated on the breeze, the princess's younger brother chasing a butterfly, oblivious to the battles once fought so fiercely within these walls. The image struck a chord deep within Layla, a symbol of innocence renewed, of peace reclaimed. Later, within the tranquil sanctuary of her private chambers, Layla allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. Her eyes lingered on the ivory walls, adorned with paintings of ancestors long gone, their stories rewritten by the love and courage of the present. She traced a fingertip along the delicate embroidery of her gown, a gift from Jamal, woven with symbols of their shared strength. He stepped forward, silent as a shadow but warm as the desert sun, and knelt before her, a gesture of devotion that transcended rank or fate. Layla, this is only the beginning. Our love has weathered storms, survived secrets, and triumphed over curses. Together, we will build a future worthy of our blood and our hearts. Tears glistened in her eyes, tears not of sorrow, but of joy, forgiveness, and promise. She lowered her hand, brushing a stray lock of hair from his brow. With you, I am whole. We were forged by pain, but bound by hope. And now, nothing can break us. Outside the palace walls, the desert. Basked in the full glow of morning. The sun rose higher, flooding the sands with light, painting the emirate in vibrant golds and soft pastels. The distant horizon shimmered with the promise of peace, a vast canvas waiting to be filled with their new story. Layla and Jamal stood together on the balcony, the city awakening beneath them. Their silhouettes cast long shadows that intertwined like their destinies, no longer fractured by secrets or betrayal, but united by love, trust, and the strength of shared dreams. Behind them, the palace stood resolute, an emblem of endurance, redemption, and the enduring power of the human heart. The empire's future belonged to them both. And as the morning breeze carried the scent of jasmine and fresh beginnings through the halls, Layla whispered into the light, "Our story is ours alone, and it will shine forevermore."